Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Bienvenue. Ni hao. And benvenuti. Don't ask me to say any more in Chinese because that's the end of it. It is a pleasure to be together. What a pleasure to meet in the off festival for these international meetings. And let me introduce you to the first guest, Achim Wieland from Cyprus. This great character represents not only a country, but also a specific formation, an artistic formation. He's also a playwright. It's important to note that he was a president of the French Festival in Cyprus in 2018. And today he has come to the festival to meet us, to share, and I will hand over to him immediately. Achim, over to you.
Thank you to be here.
Hello, bonjour. I would like to just quickly, maybe not to keep too long to get through everybody, but I would like to just say that I'm happy to be here at the Festival d'Avignon. Thank you very much for the invitation to the organizers. As already was said, I was the last year's curator of the Buffer Fringe Festival. I'm also the artistic director of Seriously Yours, which is a performance theater company working mostly with device theater, and how these two things connect is probably a kind of a socio-politically, let's say, like a volatile environment in Cyprus, a politically volatile environment in Cyprus, which brought me also to become the artistic director of the festival as a theater maker. So the two things connect in a way that our work is fairly socio-political, or always works around socio-political themes as our theater company. And also the Home for Cooperation in Cyprus, which is the organizer of the Buffer Fringe Festival, is looking for people whose work sort of reflects socio-political dynamic or the idea of strengthening a civil society that is interested in a peace building or community building process. For those of you who don't know, Cyprus is a divided country with a Turkish Cypriot and a Greek Cypriot community, also with an Armenian, Latin and Maronite minorities present. So it's there's a dividing line, there's a border going through the island. It's also the last capital in the world, the last divided capital with a wall, Nicosia. And so those things connect in certain ways, and maybe later on I can speak a little bit more about that fact and what makes the Buffer Fringe Festival potentially, or what the Buffer Fringe Festival brings maybe to the Fringe festivals or the World Fringe festivals in particular, and how our company in Cyprus also contributes to that.
Thank you. I think it's perfect for begin, and after if you have some question, we will see. Jing Wang. Thank you.
Thank you.
Je peux parler français.
I can speak French. Good. Donc, so this organization represents, as a founder and co-founder of Hybridités France Chine, and today they have brought along two artists at the festival, and we would like to know about your project and your history. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I am responsible for France-China Association. It encourages exchanges between France and China for performing arts, particularly theaters. Since 2011, we have accompanied a number of Chinese artists to the festival, the Off Festival in Avignon. And this year, we also have a shows at the Off Festival and in the Avignon Festival. Today, there are two artists who come from Shanghai, taking part in this meeting. And as they arrived yesterday, and today is the first time they've been to the Off Festival, maybe they will leave a bit earlier. Because in China, we not only work on France-China shows, but we also deal with a lot of programming and Franco-Chinese programs. Let me introduce you to the two artists who are present next to me. Mr. Erre, who is responsible for programming for the musical activities in Shanghai. He came here not only to represent their production, Le Chant de l'eau, the Song of Water, which will be at La Salle Gymnasium, but also for a musical show to be able to see what he can see musical shows, see what he can present. Mr. Peng, who is a stage director, choreographer, and also a teacher. He directed Le Chant de l'eau, the Song of Water, which will be represented as from today. Maybe I will ask them to speak a bit, explain why they have come to the Avignon Festival, what has attracted them, and through this platform, do they want to create a link, and what will happen? They will be leaving quite soon, so I suggest they speak immediately. Bon après-midi. So I represent the company which is musical shows in Shanghai. We are showing the Song of Water, which has been inspired by traditional songs in China. And by the songs.
这首歌呢，不但非常好听，它背后呢还有一个非常有意义的故事。那也因为这样的故事，所以这首歌可以流传几百年。
At point right in the show, there is one song. It's a show around a song, which is a song of water, and this song really represents the culture of this ethnic minority, which has been sung for over 100 years since the birth of this ethnic group. This, unfortunately, there's less and less chance to be able to discover these traditional songs, for instance, in this modern world which is moving so fast. It's important to acknowledge the older arts. It's part of our cultural heritage for the whole world. So, and we have been able to present this show in Shanghai thanks to the support. We've also shown it in China and also in Avignon for the European public. We want the European public to be able to discover these cultural and ancient songs of China, but I think it's important to know if they can create some dynamics for our society today. Point of fact, this ethnic group is in mountain areas and there's very little transport. A lot of the people communicate by means of their songs. So people in this ethnic group like to sing about the rivers around the mountains, and they think that if they sing to the river, the water will carry the song, and this means that everyone can share the song. And we think in France, in Avignon, we still this relationship with nature, with water, and this is something that we want to. So we want to be able to share this feeling with the French public. This is why the Song of Water has been written, and we want to present it at the festival in Avignon. So it is a hybrid show trying to link up traditional art, contemporary art, and there's a musician playing piano live on stage, but at the same time you have traditional songs. So we really want to explore contemporary art alongside traditional art. When you look at the planet in the universe, you can see that every territory is linked by the water currents, streams. We think that the art of shows has this role to be able to have the different continents exchange with each other. Now, I suggest that the other gentleman will say why he wanted to come to the festival. Good morning. I'm the representatives of musical hall in the city of Shanghai. Our venue was founded 90 years ago, and it is still one of the fundamental places in China concerning musical art. Every year we invite artists from the whole world to come to our venue so that we can show the different types of musical art.
因为我们觉得，除了把优秀的艺术家引进来之外，我们很希望把中国的这个年轻的音乐家、艺术家、创意的团队也介绍到世界上去。
So we're going to create new forms. We not only want to invite foreign artists, we also want to produce Chinese shows and encourage Chinese artists so that they can exchange with the whole world. That is why we came with the Le Chant de l'eau, the Song of Water.
刚刚导演也介绍，他的这个作品其实是围绕这个中国的一个苗族的湖南的一个古老的一个这么一个艺术来展开的。所以呢，我们是希望就是上海音乐厅能够成为这么一个连接中国和世界的这么一个平台。这也是为什么我们希望把水枪是我们上海音乐厅的第一部违约制作的作品，能够带到阿维尼翁跟更多的观众见面。
The Le Chant de l'eau is our first production, which is meant for the international stage, because our objective is also to promote the Chinese culture, and so it's also a close link with the contemporary stage, which is why we have come here to present this work. And through this show, we had to set up quite a close link between France and China.
所以呢，非常希望能够有更多的阿维尼翁和法国的、欧洲的观众能够通过阿维尼翁戏剧节能够看到我们这个作品。我们也很欢迎大家未来有时间、有机会能够到上海来上海音乐厅坐坐，进行音乐会。
Shanghai, as you know, is an international city, and we also thinking of the art of music and dance. These arts don't need any language, so they can travel easily. So we hope that the guests will be able to go and see our shows. I'll also like to send out an invitation for you to come to Shanghai, to our venue, to discover our shows. Thank you very much.
也要感谢这个阿维尼翁戏剧节的邀请，再次感谢大家。
I'd also like to thank the Festival of Avignon for inviting us today for an exchange with you. Thank you. Thank the Festival of in Avignon for allowing us to have access to these unique times, moments in time. Thank you, you both, and thank you to our artists. And now let me hand over to the next guest,
Eleonora Romeo,
Eleonora Romeo, who is Italian and French also, stage director. At the origin of the projects that we're going to talk about, here again we can say it is a committed one, a first part of a project which will be in 3 parts, but I will hand over now to Eleonora. Thank you. So thank you, and thank you for this invitation and for these exchanges which have already started in a very rich way. I'm Eleonora Romeo. I'm Italian, but I've been living in Avignon for 12 years. I'm an adoptive Avignonnaise. I came to the University of Avignon, a first-year study, and then I discovered the OFF Festival in 2008. My first year, I started working with an associations, companies, troops, and when I saw the exchanges possible around the festival, the dynamics of the festival, all the shows and something, I was really fascinated, and I decided I didn't want to leave the city anymore. And since I settled here, I started working with a number of troops, more in the field of dissemination and communication around the shows. And I went to Paris a bit to see what the capital was like. But over time, working with stage directors, choreographers on very interesting projects, I wanted to defend my own project. And in 2013, for the first time, I read this three-part document of naufrage shipwreck. For instance, we're on the first part on an issue which means a lot to me. Unfortunately, this is still in a very poetic way, and it really created a wish for me. I left my country. I'm not comparing myself to the Africans who are trying to cross the Mediterranean in the way they do today, but I came to work here, and no one has been accused of anything, so I was interested in this shipwreck issue. How can we add my first stone? I said to prepare this project and make this text known as extensively as possible. I think that it is important to have a role to talk about our society, maybe in a political way, in a poetic way, as artists can do. And then you have the whole aspect, which is more artistic about the choice. It's an Italian text, translated officially. It exists in French. We took the French translation. I'm Italian, and I chose to work with an amazing actress who is here, who is also Italian. To start with, we said we'll show this in France, but we're Italian actors, stage director, choreographer. What will our position be? Shall we choose the original text, or shall we work on it in French? We chose to work on it in French, and I think that it is something which works quite well. We kept a bit of Italian, despite all. I think maybe you can hand back the microphone for now, and if you have any questions, we can talk more about the project. I encourage you to make the most of our speakers, because behind this very brief presentation of the project, there's a lot of stories, suffering, of fun, involvement. We all follow a pathway, and sometimes we come into difficulties, and to have support on our projects is a good thing. And also challenges. This is something which helps us move ahead. Let me continue. Let me apologize for the Chinese artists who have to leave for now, because they need to go and work. This is cultural exchange. For those who are present here, let me encourage you to go and see Le Chant de l'eau, the Song of Water. That's good. That's it. Those are our business cards. So, have a good day. Maybe I didn't say the right thing. So, what a pleasure. Florence Francisco. Florence Francisco is a producer. Also an artistic counselor, a production administrator. It says production de la scène in terms of structure. I think I'll give you the microphone immediately. I know you work both with France and Switzerland, amongst others. Over to you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I was fortunate enough to be invited to exchange and share the activity of the Bureau of the Production de la Scène, who provide support for international artists who speak in an international way and who travel beyond the borders of the countries where they live. Here I'm going to talk about a Swiss performer artist, Daniel Hellman, who is not here at this 2019 OFF Festival. At the moment, he is working on a creation, but he has been in Avignon in the past. Tromboy in 2016. Tromboy by Daniel Hellman was part of the teams selected by this first Swiss selection in Avignon in 2016. There were 3 other artists. I supported Daniel Hellman in this Swiss system set up at the OFF Festival. And we decided together to continue our way. It is an attractive artist, and attraction in the right meaning, who brings along a lot of challenges. He is about 30 years old, very artistically mature from one point of view, but my point of view also accompanied by other points of view. And I'm very happy today to present Daniel Hellman, invited by Gabriel Baye, who also saw Daniel Hellman's work in Avignon and in Montpellier for the Explicit Festival. I've made notes because, of course, I'm not an artist. I would have liked him to be here amongst us, but he is working on a creation. His past, if I talk about it, about his history, it is not his form, multiple. He has many lives. I try to follow him, and that is what is interesting in the work done by this young man and the way he fits into European society. Also, Daniel Hellman trained in lyrical singing, in stage theatrical work in Lausanne and Bern. He also studied philosophy, which explained that his work leads to a lot of questions on political or philosophical issues, and he speaks very poetically about these issues. He became known in contemporary dance after taking part in several operas in Switzerland with 2 plays, K and Untold, created with a dancer artist of Dana Patel. He co-signed a play for the for ballets. That was how he started out. From 2012 on, he decided to express himself, to add his stone, In 2012, in the activity of his structure Art 3, he has been creating his own artistic work. Internationally, Daniel, yes, certainly, because Daniel can talk about Switzerland, can talk about the UK, about Germany, about Italy, several territories. He talks Swiss, German, he speaks German, French. He goes to the festival in Italy, works on Italian, and he expresses himself in Italian. He is a performer who leads us to see a multiple artistic form, using the quality of artistic work combined with dancing, text, and singing. In his plays, he considered that his artistic practice is a kind of intersectional activism. He looks into the desire and relationships with the body, the power in the world of sexuality, human rights, and animal rights, which he includes in the injustice which really shock him today. I think that Daniel is dreaming of a brilliant world. He tries to bring out what is best in us with a lot of humor. He looks for empathy from us, as well as curiosity, openness beyond the borders of a state and the borders that we create for ourselves. He is in an approach to create a debate on the suffering of men, women, and animals. He created a play called Food Service in 2014. It is a performance was in Europe, Asia, United States. Food Service, as the title says, offers an individual public to pay for a service, whatever it is. It might be an opera show, babysitting, all kinds of things. In an intimate space, he creates a space in time where the public asks for a service and for a fee. In Fringe, which marked the Off Festival in Avignon in 2016, he took a position as an artist, a sex worker, and then other text. Something we can talk about. Handback, I think. Thank you. Florence, as you see, we bring projects, artists, and countries. I would like, I'm taking the liberty to speak for a minute or two to talk about the project that we have as well, because one country has not been mentioned, something one that represents us. This year we had a very important meeting with the Ministry of Culture and of Labour in Malta, which is why I would like to say that we have been advised to work on a project on communication, on verbal expression, differences, knowing that Malta speaks Maltese. The Maltese speak two languages from birth, Maltese and French, and English, sorry. And then they speak French, Spanish, Italian, so on. So no doubt concerning Europe and the openness to other countries, I think they can teach us a great deal, and they need us as well. This project all talk about verbal, non-verbal communication. It's a pity that the person in charge of Malta, the project, is only coming this afternoon, because I think it would have been a good thing to be able to introduce her and include her amongst our guests. If you like, this is a good chance I would like to start an exchange. If you have questions regarding the different projects mentioned, regarding the countries that we represent, it might be interesting because here we have two pearls with us, and I think we ought to make the most of it. The way that you work in theaters is completely different from one country to another. Do we need to know, if you need to know any more, make the most of it. I have loads of questions, but I'm waiting for yours. Well, some time ago, maybe 10 years ago, I saw the first Chinese shows at the La Salle College. I'd never been to China. So what struck me was the frontal position of the actors opposite the public. I think they were putting on a European play, UNESCO. So for us as spectators, very original. I knew from culture that it was the theatrical convention in China, and I went to another play, and I felt that for many spectators in the first part, when in the large circle, the Wheel of Time, have this same frontal position, moving very little opposite the audience. And there were several spectators who left quite quickly because I think they were disturbed by this unusual position for European public. Well, thank you. I say that you mean that for the spectators, you think the Chinese shows are not shown in the same thing? I think it's prejudice. There are a lot of frontal shows in the audience, so I don't understand why it would be unusual. Maybe I didn't understand your question. It's, I think, a lot of plays are put on that way. Will UNESCO, for instance, play? So the person is speaking without a microphone. Well, most likely it is that we don't know it. I think we're not used to other cultures. And so the festival is a mine of wealth from that point of view, where you can go and meet other cultures, other methods, other ways of working. Okay, now I understand your question better. It's a feeling because there are so many Chinese shows, so many ways of interpreting. Maybe it was just chance that you came across these two shows. It's not a general case, I think. It's a great polemic. For the first, maybe 50 spectators might have left. 50 out of 800 is, well. And for the second, maybe 30 spectators left. But those who stayed were really delighted. It's a very strong story. I think it depends on the show, and it depends on the stage direction as well. It's true that we would like to so let me move the reflection to our commitments. We make choices. We make choices to present shows, to work years upstream, to go and find authors or write, or go more in depth. And I would like to go around our guests again, starting like with Achim, to try and not talk about maybe issues, but maybe rather solutions or political difficulty to get to the heart of the subject, to stage yourself, to go in towards a public which is not necessarily prepared, where some you might have a difficult structure to deal with. I'd like to talk about that, and then through that we can talk about all the issues which sometimes make us suffer, but linked to the wealth of our creation.
Thank you. Maybe it's a good, if I understood the lead correctly, but maybe it's a good idea to quickly talk about our work a little bit more. Again, I'm here in kind of two positions as Buffer Fringe Artistic Director, last year Curator, but our own work very much when you talked about the way we can maybe reach the public or a way to access or to pass a message in a different way. Our work is very much, seriously yours' work, is very much interested in bringing socio-political themes maybe in a different way or to pass messages. I mean, in this world today, which is so much more divisive, it's full of populists, it's full of divisive forces. It's not about the we or the kind of coming together, but it's really trying to push us into our corners again. That's very much how we perceive it. And there are several themes that we worked in the past. For example, one performance was called Fear Industry. And instead of doing a performance on fear, we tried to create a performance that started in Cyprus, collecting ideas of fear or where fears are present in society. That was in 2013, actually right before things like Marine Le Pen, right before the Brexit, right before Trump, right before many, many things that have happened. So it seems now a little bit of an old head, like, okay, fear. Of course, people are working with fear. At the time, it was not. But the interesting thing about that performance was that we went around in Europe and we went on a guest tour and we invited on each city, each country, we invited an additional artist to talk about the fear of that particular country. And the fear in Greece, for example, which is a very much an economic fear, is very different than the fear in Sweden, which is, there is no economic fear, or in Switzerland, for example. There's different fears, which are so interesting because we really think of it in a very broad way or in a very generic way. But it was very interesting to find out in 5, 6, 7, 8 different countries about fears and how finely tuned they are with what is going on in that country. So what is a fear in one country is not a fear in another country. Another performance, for example, one of the later ones is called Tea Ceremony. It's about consumerism, it's about ideas of post-colonialism, it's about greed, it's about a lack of empathy, it's about overconsumption. And it comes in a cup of tea. The reason why I mention it is that we all know what the problems of the world are. And I think often trying to reach an audience, either you pass the audience with a very abstract message and it kind of passes over them, or you confront them with something that they already know. Because we know audiences are mixed. So what some people are aware of, other people are not. So we found it very interesting to talk about this theme of consumerism and this idea of lack of empathy and the idea of greed in the world and the idea of the 5% that have it and the 95% of the world that don't, and how to pass this message. And we came up with the idea of a geisha to serve a cup of tea. It's a very simple cup of tea. There's a geisha entering. It's a male geisha. And the performer slowly, through a guided meditation that pretends that it walks you through a rosy garden and it walks you through onto this path to this beautiful tea room to have your cup of tea that calls to your presence, to your nowness, to your being here in this space, you and me, I'm your host, you're my guests, and so forth, to slowly unravel the idea of where the tea comes from. And he plays this out in many ways, where the gold comes from, where the cobalt comes from, where the T-shirts come from, where pretty much everything comes from in this world that we consume. But it's all packed into kind of the opposite scenario in a place that is very serene and that's very, where you feel very protected. You're about to have your cup of tea and you're opening up all your channels, and whoops, there it comes from under the carpet. Where does all the stuff that we consume come from? I think I want to leave it here, but those are just two examples maybe to address how socio-politically relevant themes can maybe be presented in an international forum, and how they can maybe be presented in a way to an audience that is probably aware of the things that are wrong in this world, but that are not, that have heard about it a lot. We all see it all the time, but what makes us react to something, and what makes us, leaves us cold?
Do you have any questions from the audience? Otherwise, I'll ask Eleonora the same questions. Eleonora, what does it mean today to create, work on a committed project? What does it demand of you? Work like one of us in particular, but when you have a project which is really a committed one, for instance, you worked on migration, you could imagine a very difficult period, particularly in Italy, but everywhere in the world. Well, as I said, I discovered the text in 2013, but the first part of this trilogy was written in 2003. It led me to think, because people in Sicily are already seeing what we see every day on television. It dates. And this is what struck me first. And when I said earlier, the fact of choosing and carrying it as an artistic project was because they also explained why I wanted to talk about this issue, give the speech to all these people who have been shipwrecked in the Mediterranean. We know nothing about them. There's no more story, no bodies, nothing. To write a story, not a true story, but still true for thousands of others. I have no pretension of being able to change the point of view of people, but maybe I can awake consciences. As Achim has just said, I think we have a public who is aware of what is going on, and they come to see this type of a committed show. They know what we're talking about, and I hope that there will be other people as well. The strength of the Avignon Festival to defend my project, to go and get the spectators. You have to go and meet people, you have to go and talk to people, say why they should come and see the show, what it's about. And so we have a very varied public, and sometimes we go to get people who wouldn't have come to the project, they wouldn't have come to listen to a story like the one we are telling in the show, not that type of issue, because sometimes they say, oh, not again, that's too much. No, come and see it. Because our role is to tell you this reality, but from a different point of view. I was saying earlier, the text, I'm talking about mine because I'm carrying my experience. It's very poetic, soft. We try to put this poetry back in the staging as well. We're talking about a terribly difficult story. You see it on television every day, but come and listen to it in a different way. Be more humane. Come to meet it. This is a real challenge of the artists and shows. I appreciate what you said about fear, Achim. It was very interesting. I think in particular in Italy, it's a government of fear. They play a lot on that, fear of others, fear of foreigners. And you see that today, no, it's a true wealth to meet amongst different countries, different artists, different ways of seeing things. And I wanted to defend that. And I think it is very important today. Maybe it's not a question of fear only. There's violence, vulgarity, which is debasing human beings more and more. As a view of our society is more difficult. We work in a world which is very often at the other end.
Cher Jing Wang, est-ce qu'on peut parler en Chine?
So in China, Jing Wang, can we talk about committed creation? What would it mean? Is a possibility to say it, and what does it mean to be really engaged and committed in your work? Of course, it does exist. And point out, this question comes back constantly in France. Maybe I've answered that 100 times. But the Italians, we Italians were asking it all the time. I think that for an artist, the main importance is the heart. It's nothing can prevent artists from being committed. There are so many in China, all over the place, to talk about subjects, to have a view on society. There are a lot of ways and things. So it's essential for the art of shows. In China, there are many artists who really make committee declarations. Don't you see in some areas people? So we've had comments saying that the shows have been shown in China because they seem too committed. For us, it's, if we talk about, for instance, experimental shows, I think there are barriers everywhere in the world. And I think the Chinese artists are the same as French or European artists. Everyone has a moment of... everyone has their own view on society. Committed creations have existed in our country for a very long time, and it's never over. Thank you. Florence, Francisco. For those who know you, when you in your work, even in Switzerland, I'm being provocative, that's why I'm here, but so do you think, because I know Switzerland as well, are there committed projects, and what would it mean for you in Switzerland? We want to get into different worlds. Well, it's not, we can't really say that the Italians are mafiosi, and in Switzerland you got cows, and the French have their baguette of bread. Well, so Switzerland is a small territory, and I travel around a lot, and we're working around with Daniel Hellman, who is based in Zurich, but the work goes to different territories in Switzerland, both in German-speaking and Italian-speaking or French-speaking. There are committed artists, many of them are, and in their artistic offer as well. So the there's another generations of artists in Switzerland who are also challenging the world, their society, in the best possible way on a stage set. And Daniel is one of them. Has also carried work with an artist called Ursula Gruel on the question of the refugees in Switzerland, because you also have refugees in Switzerland. Daniel, of course, is trying to make us think about the violence of our world, which has become extremely aggressive, I think, based on the different experience we see from other countries as well in Europe, the Mediterranean and elsewhere. And these artists, amongst which Daniel is, cannot do artistic work without taking a very strong position on questions that they find insufferable to all of us. So it creates debate. This is his approach to carry debate in an intelligent way, to carry a debate regarding human rights, animal rights, women's rights. For instance, the work on Trumbull on sex workers in Switzerland. Prostitution is legal. They have a work permit. They have social security services. It's not. It's in Swiss and Germany, but it's not the case in many countries. For instance, in France. And politicians find it very difficult to legislate, and this dates back considerably regarding the question of prostitution. Taken on this subject with the play with Anne Zelenka is creating the feminine version, Tom Girl, which will be shown at the French Festival in Edinburgh in August 2019. Also created a trade called Workmen for... Sorry, I didn't understand it. Presented in Lausanne, linked to the question of bad treatment to animals and injustice that we have to face from the time when there is a difference, or there may be a difference. Yes, Daniel is a committed artist, as many artists in Switzerland. A lot of things happen there. Thank you. I have a question for our guest. What is the message that you want to give to young artists at the festival? 1,592 shows, 6,000 artists, 15 countries of origin, I think. 30 rather. In 139 venues. What would we advise? Through when we work on the training times, for instance, what is the advice that we can give for culture, art, in order to develop, to be able to penetrate the different worlds and be able to provide your own contribution? We would like hope, we would like to know that tomorrow can be better. That is why we are here, because we have this hope.
Well, I would like to say that for younger artists, that the good news, the bad news is that we live in a very divisive world. The good news is there is a lot of material to talk about, and I think it is visible already that many more performances in general, I feel, on the, at least on the European festival, not only Fringe, but festival circuit, are much more concerned with real themes that go really beyond the only personal, I'm not saying it as a negative term, as in personal, but that go really beyond the only personal, but towards the work that is personal or personal aspect, but that really ties into the larger themes and the larger themes that concern society, that really reach out from the individual's pain to a broader spectrum, that is not just involved just with myself as an artist, but that really reaches and touches in many ways. So I think that's wonderful news. The second thing I would say to young artists is, it's actually, the second thing I would say is more towards festivals, Fringe festivals, not just the Avignon Le Off, but in general, to possibly give more room to work that is not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily only have to rely on income through tickets and through kind of making your show happen, relying on people to come, because there's always this factor of commerce immediately involved, where a fun and a dynamic show is maybe more attractive than a politically or very concerned show or story of pain. I'm just going to put this out there, maybe that's a little bit generalized, but I would say generally entertainment seems very popular. Things that are maybe require a second thought or that leave you with a taste of pain or a taste of thought or a taste of concern might be a bit more difficult. So I would like to say to a young generation to also really push the overall spectrum of the performing arts, as in becoming young festival makers, festival creators, festival being involved in festivals, to open up paths that can create opportunities for yourself and for artists to access a festival, not having to rely only on ticket money, revenue, if that makes sense.
This one is working.
Another voice. C'est spécial, je suis capable de bouleverser.
We want to talk about upheaval and so on.
Nos intervenants ont mis
So, the other guests want to add something. I'd like to share a point of view as an example from the producers. When the show was shot in China, I worked with Anna Descartes, who asked how she could travel all this way, and she said that to do this work, you must have conviction, self-confidence, and will. So I'd like to share these points with young artists. So for the environment of shows for younger people, you must have this wish to create and freedom to create. And this is not easy. The Off Festival in Avignon is very difficult. You have to get the public, those who put the programs on and everything. It's nothing easy. There's no direct way. So you need conviction, and you must have self-confidence as well, and trust others. Thank you for this advice. I'll try and continue this way. Let me just come back to what Jing said, because I'm in the place of a young artist, an emerging company at the festival to defend a project, and also you have to go and get the public, find the public, the programmers, press, and so on. It is an everyday fight, which starts on creation when you have a committed project, but it continues in the field on a festival like this one, where you know that there is a lot happening, and a lot is at stake, including economically. As you said, number of shows you mentioned, the big artistic offer. It's great. It allows a lot of meeting, but it is a constant battle every day to go and find new public, as we said earlier, to find different outlooks and make sure that the show can go on. And you can live through the season once the festival is finished. I think that for shows like ours, it's good to see this international aspect. I know the festival for 12 years and see there are more and more countries coming to the festival to open up and to be programmed in other places as well. I think it's becoming more and more easier. There have translation, subtitles. It really is an openness to the world from a practical point of view when you set on a show today. And proof of it is here up front today. We come back to the relationships between artists, theatres, all times. We won't talk about that. I'm talking about who creates a project, who manages it, who puts it together, who deals with technical issues. We have a whole family who does subtitles, who translates. Our interpreter here with me. So, all this means who is behind the desk, who prepared the festival, who is behind all the sites and so on. It's not only the artists, of course they are on the front line, but we're all on the front line. So here in particular, and many thanks to all those who work on the project. And Eleonora, you were saying the relationship with the public. It's true, as you were saying, how we need to go on training. It's constant. After 40 years, I still find that I need to learn a lot. But we also have the public, who is both trained and informed, new generation, and also continuity. And this is work that needs to be put together. Amongst our guests, are there any questions or more exchanges on this issue? If anyone wants to go more in depth with just one of the speakers about their commitment in one country, in Cyprus, Italy, France, China, do not hesitate to take the microphone. Today, we also have the Fringe Festival of Milano, who will be here this afternoon. We'll to continue, and we have Edinburgh also. It's great. Malta this afternoon. I do a lot of festivals, and they're becoming more and more international, whether in dance or theatre or music. First of all, you've got subtitles, and that is essential. I saw the show, poetry show, splendid. And in the show, as it's on exile and immigration, there's Italian, Spanish, Persian, Turkish. And this gives a chance to hear the music of these shows, because it's not at all the same in Turkish or Persian for our European ears. If you speak Persian or Turkish, you recognize it, but it gives us a chance to travel through different sounds. whether it's Montpellier Dance or Cannes Festival, or here, of course, in Avignon. I think the main part of this circulation is translation. That is amazing. And if you like, after knowledge, as I was saying earlier, a theatrical presentation is specific to each country. To start with, I know when I went to see this show about China, so there were very few people in the audience. That's normal. And I thought it was very brave to put on this show because it was diving into the unknown for me. I'm very curious by nature. I go see all the foreign shows as a priority. I loved the Kazakhs last year, so I have the impression that there will be more and more openness. Our destiny is to unite beyond and around art and culture, really beyond. So much better if we have countries who bring cultures and shows. We really need the festival in Avignon to be more and more open. And this is what we're trying to do, because it means that you can know the work. We're in Cyprus, Italy, Switzerland, China. Today we are able to spread. So could someone else have a chance to speak? Sorry. A personal experience. Maybe I can't generalize it, but I was in Italy and I don't speak Italian, contrary to what my T-shirt might give the impression of. We went to Italy, we were able to go and see a play. There was no translation, but what I thought interesting was there was an introduction to the show. We met Renata, who explained to me what would be in the show, and she introduced it to me. So I was able to watch the show. It wasn't so much the words which attracted me, it was the playing of the actress, the acting, and it really got me on board. I think, yes, it's interesting to have a translation, but no doubt it might be interesting to have an introduction to the show, a kind of a permission to be in a place where you don't understand the language. So, an introduction, then everyone can develop their own type of information, and gives a different vision, another presence in the theatre. We'll talk about Renato, but we'll talk about the French Festival of Milano. I'm very pleased to be able to see this meeting. And thank you, Jing, for talking about all. We're very fortunate to have this living experience. I can see that it's a battle for everyone to be able to carry their projects. So, when we talk about China, Switzerland, or Italy, are there other countries also sensitive to international projects? I'm Russian origin, and sorry, I didn't understand that. So my question, are there organizations who are interested in international projects? Because I am carrying a project which could go to every country. Well, thank you for the question. Can our guests provide an answer in the field? What are the countries interested? Well, China, for more than 10 years, we are trying to bring in more and more foreign shows to introduce them to the Chinese stage. It's important to allow the professionals in China to meet others. In France-China Association, we support production, and we mainly work on co-production. We did set up a project from very beginning to put on, but we have particular interest in artists. We want to follow interesting artists and put a project together with them. There are more and more international festivals in China. Every year, French artists will be on Chinese stages. You know that France has the largest festival in a foreign country, in China, and it lasts for 3 months in about 12 Chinese cities. It's on comic strips, different shows, dance and cinema. And I think you really need to have this dialogue and exchange, which is essential. Thank you very much. I'm based in Paris, France, and the French cultural network is considerable. There are very many projects for international programming in France. We are very fortunate. We complain a lot, but we have a number of tools which carry international programming, whether festivals, highlights in venues. We can talk about it if you want, because all the structures we called national stages who program in France, apart from the festival, like the Festival of Avignon is an excellent example, but there are plenty of others. And of course you have to look at the projects in different venues, but there are very many of them. In Switzerland also, there are a lot of places who are opening up to other international cultures. Briefly, in Italy also you have an official programming in Rome, Turin, contemporary and international programs. It's happening more and more. More and more festivals with international programming in a very wide sense, with artists coming from every country. And then, just like to say that in Italy, for instance, what is difficult, and here I'm talking about Italian artists, maybe emerging artists. In Italy, we don't have the same status in France as intermittent du spectacle. It's difficult for artists to be able to live 100% on their artistic projects. Not the case for everyone, but one type of difference for artists. But there's international projects which are hosted in Italy as well. In France, artists are allowed to do their job, and we have a special social protection system. It's an example, it's a model which is extremely fragile. For more than 25 years, I have been accompanying a number of artists, and very few are selected. In France, we have more and more artists who are in a difficult position, although there's an improvement. Whatever the political factions that we have in France in power, not many manage to deal with the system, and the companies don't have subsidies, you don't get funding from the state or regional funding, can also run into difficulties and not have access to the social system. They're saying that if we sit around the table in Europe, responsible for different cultures, different countries, despite all, let me tell you, France has chances and opportunities that other countries don't have. We all want to improve and do better, but this specific status, let us keep it. It amuses me sometimes because I ask an artist, what do you do? I say, I'm intermittent. What do you do? My job is intermittent. Personally, it touches me. You're not intermittent. You have a status, if you like, but your job, you are a creator, stage director, an artist or something, you are not an intermittent. I'm full-time. I live full-time. I'm not intermittent, but that's just a comment. I think we could discuss a lot about the intermittent status. I'm an Italian who works in France, and I'm sure that the intermittent status is very favorable. I quite agree with you that this debate could be opened, but I would like to come back. I'd like to open up an area on how can you get shows to travel in the language in which they were created, in the mother tongue. There are translations, but for me, for years, I've been looking into this issue. So I opened up workshop with other artists so that we can reflect on how, and several types of translation. I could talk about it some other time, but I think that we need to open up this point, because listen to the language is also a wealth and it needs to be protected. And there are different forms, I know, which are possible. But let us see together. I think it's an interesting research, and this is something, a point that I work on. I think it's very important. Thank you. Anyone has a project, Achim, for instance, or other Eleonora? I'll come back to the issue. There's a kind of polemics have been started, just as a comparison with Italy regarding the status, but I agree with you. It has been threatened over a number of years, and it's more and more difficult to get this intermittent status. I've been working in this environment for 12 years. I have a link, affiliation with the status of intermittent, but I'm not a full-time actual intermittent. It's become more and more difficult. To answer your question, I've been working on a project, the text of a Sicilian playwright. The original text is in Italian. I am Italian, and I chose to work with Italian actors as well. Not because I wanted to be Italian, I wanted it to be her for artistic reasons. So it's 100% Italian. The text is officially translated into French by Jean-Paul Manganaro. And on creation, I didn't create for the Off Festival. I created during the season, and the question came up, shall we put the show on in Italian with subtitling from beginning to end, or shall we use the translation and create it in French? And you can say projects exist in both languages. This is our strength. But for creation in France, I don't really have an answer. I'm just giving you an example. It's true that I said, well, for the season, it wasn't during the festival. Will my public agree to come and see a show with very poetic text? There's a lot of text in it, all in Italian. Will they accept subtitling all the way through? It was a true issue, and somewhere I gave in. I said to myself, I think it won't be possible, it will be very complicated with this text to last for 1 hour and 10 minutes with subtitles, so I decided to create it in French. And that's it. The strength in my case, it exists in both languages, and in French I kept a little part in Italian with subtitling. To admit that I didn't think that for the French public in Avignon over season, I didn't think I could put on Italian. Let me continue with my reflections on keeping the spirit of origin. We talked about subtitling. Maybe we will have precious meetings in the festival for distribution or meetings as well. Concerning the language, what I think is interesting, what you're saying, when for years I bought the Commedia dell'arte, we played in Italian or even in a dialect. We didn't even ask ourselves if the public understood or not. We went around the world with the show in Italian, language of origin. Concerning other projects, we prepared one project in French because we were going to be showing it in France, but it also exists in English, Italian, and Spanish. I think sometimes we have to get out of that a bit, but there are possibilities, and I see it on several shows, very good shows, to have your text in hand, at least to tell the story, as our Chinese friends very often do. Linked to the story. So I went to see the Kabuki theater, for instance, saw the Mère Courage in Russian for the first time. I didn't understand a single word, but I still have the show in mind. So I think we can combine our traditions by conditioning the spectators and the audience so that they can have access and go beyond. Let's just maintain our origins as much as possible, and let's move to more horizons. With the question of language, I think it's also linked to the artistic offer. I've been with a lot of choreographers, so the question of language does not come up. But for the work of a theatrical artist, where there is a text, it depends on the offer. Concerning Tomboy or Tom Girl, or Daniel Hellman, considering the subject, is it important for him to speak in the language of the country hosting him, if possible? Because it is a universal subject, which in every country fits in. And there are other plays where there is a true difficulty, and question of subtitling occurs. It has to have a meaning, and it must be relevant. What I also think is interesting that some theatrical offers are in the artist's language. It's also a culture, a message, and a beauty. So sometimes it is not necessary to understand everything. That was your experience, sir, with a show, an Italian show. But this is a true issue, and for every artist today. This question comes up a lot about circulating their works. If there is a text, what are you going to do? Do you want to offer a public the original version? If it has a meaning, they work in the language of the country or on subtitles. Remember shows I did by Castellucci and no subtitling. So, make a comment, testimonial, and maybe a question. I'm a musician, so I'm less concerned by translation issues, even if we do realize, in point of fact, there are strong cultural differences. Some musics are more acceptable, but I think that worldwide today there's a lot of research in different musics. I've been to China in particular. I work in classical music as an individual, playing in classical orchestras and invited to festivals in China. I realized that, for instance, concerning my troupe with 5 musicians, we were quite below the radars concerning the French culture, when you talk about the advantages of the French system. And I have been an intermittent artist for years. I have a Colombian artist as well. They're all happy to have the same status. And to say that maybe one of the adverse effects of the French system when I went to China were to well-known venues. As a small troupe, when you want to export yourself, it's very complicated. The slots have already been filled. Coming to Avignon, we had contact with Chinese programmers. They came and they liked it, but then they said, well, we need to find money for tickets and everything. And the tour wasn't possible because we had dates planned for China. We also had contacts. We had a Russian programmer who came as well. Don't tell you the whole story, but it is complicated when you're a small troupe. International means extra cost. And I see that we have people here who are organized and don't always live in the country where they come from. I'm from France, French, come from France, but to go and play abroad with a small troupe, it's quite difficult. Achim?
I'd just like to add one more thing about the subtitling issue. Interestingly enough, one of the reasons why our performances are in English is exactly for that reason. Now, of course, English is, it's the world language, and there's, of course, other very important languages. But just as a general twist, also to get out of this political situation of, should it be in Greek or should it be in Turkish? And if it's in Greek, it must be Turkish subtitle. If it's in Turkish, it must be Greek subtitle plus English, and so on and so forth. So Cyprus is a very complicated situation, but in A, to get out of this dilemma, we did it in English, and B, also for our shows to circulate easier. So one consideration for any artist should definitely be a consideration of maybe not staying in a language that is not much spoken, like, for example, Greek, or a language like in Armenia. I mean, there's you're not doing yourself a favor if you stay in this language. Now, of course, there is great poetry, great culture, great issues entrenched, or not entrenched, that are coming through language. So, of course, there are certain things that probably cannot be done. But especially, I'm speaking only for our work, if it's relevant to the world, if it's addressing contemporary political issues, English makes sense. And one funny anecdote I would like to add, with Fear Industry, part of the idea was that the whole performance is in English, but each country that we traveled to, there was this little fear in Sweden embedded in this huge English show, and then a little fear in German, the German fears, huge, embedded in this huge English show. And the same in Greece, in Athens, and the same in Switzerland. So there is like, suddenly you have this little mini fear of a country that is kind of washed over with this huge world fear that's all bombarding you in English. So of course every show has its own dynamic. Also, performativity is a huge aspect. I think that the word is just one way to communicate, but there is also things communicated beyond the word. So for me, for sure, depending again on the show, a huge aspect is transported to the audience by stage presence, by silence, by music, by light, by set, by a certain performativity. Fear Industry was 50%, 40% text, and I think it felt like 60% was just these actors being in constant fear. They were connected to a wire, like mountain climbers, so they could not move all around the stage. They could only move from the very left to the very right on like a wire. So if one actor passes the other, you had to kind of deconnect yourself and move the other one around and hook yourself up again in this fear of suddenly dropping off the stage if you're not always connected to this wire that nobody knows where it comes from or where it goes, but it's kind of this safety line. So I would say even 70% was produced through this energy on stage. Of course, so every show is really different, but this is just one commentary from a very personal perspective. It makes sense, English makes sense, and of course performativity and to really consider your other elements versus the word also makes sense. And maybe one last note, what was said earlier about, I think it makes a lot of sense to give, I think it was Renato's idea, or it came up in that context, to give a sense of a show through a description. Now, I'm not a fan of like describing the show. I mean, you should see it and understand it, not read it to understand it. But if it helps, it's a great tool to give this extra sense and then let the show work its energy, because even poetry in a language that I don't understand, if I understand the essence, gives me something.
Thank you. Oui.
Well, thank you. The quote of the festival, it's important to the music goes along languages. In Edinburgh, can you talk about your experience? What are the languages used in apart from English?
Well, the Edinburgh Fringe has this year 3,800 shows registered, and there are 63 countries. Yeah. So obviously English is one of the main languages spoken at the Edinburgh Fringe, but there are countries from all over the world speaking their own languages. We also have a huge amount of international showcases. In my experience, I find that not many shows have translation or subtitling. A lot of the shows that come from international and non-English speaking countries will either organise, they'll translate their script prior to coming to the Fringe, or they will perform in their own language, and very infrequently do they organise subtitling or translation. I think the biggest way that shows coming to the Edinburgh Fringe tackle the language barrier is by ensuring that the shows are very visual and very physical, and that's, you know, it's the most common way of tackling that issue. A lot of the shows that come from non-speaking country or non-English speaking countries won't have any language at all. They will be dance or circus or very visual and physical shows. So yeah, it just seems to be more kind of contemporary work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Merci. It's true. So it's important with the body. Our training as actors in Italy, I'm not talking about clown companies or anything, but they're also based on the body. The two conservatoires create space for expressing yourself through body, to have a different language. In France, So as actors, we work a lot between our head and our torso mainly. Two last questions. Is there any? It's a good chance for a bit more exchange. We could ask Renato to talk about Milan off and the international projects there. Because since last year he has been hosting French companies. In point of fact, we'll be talking this afternoon on this subject, but it has always been my dream since I came to Avignon. I wanted to change my activity to become involved in theatrical work. I used to be in jazz in the past, but my mission now is international theatrical work. And words are very close linked to what the playwright thinks. I think that a play in Russian must be played in Russian because of the thought of Mio Cara, for instance, or Darling. It's all the same. When you write the word, that's the way the playwright thinks of it, it's linked to a kind of gesture. And I think the future of theatres to be open and find a way to convey the thoughts in the way that they were written, rather than a translation. The public, after 30 years, I'm beginning to think some people are used to it. And you think of the future, you think of technology now. Maybe subtitling, I think it's important. You think of other things. You need to be visionary today. You need to dream and think of a world where everyone can be an area to think of freedom. The Milan Off Fringe Festival is only 3 years old, it's young, and we've looked at what happened in large festivals, and we're trying to implement it in Italy. But, we have a number of unemployed artists. The question is, in Italy, artists are poor people in the country. We have made a lot of effort to get that far with this, have this international focus. And I'm not mad. People are doing it in other parts of the world. I'm not alone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Renato. Does anyone want to ask another question? So, I would like to thank Achim Wieland from Cyprus. Jing Wang from China. What part of China? That's not Saigon. Saigon is the capital of Vietnam. I am based in Paris. I travel backwards and forwards. The troupe were from Shanghai.
Eleonora Romeo.
Eleonora Romeo, Italian and French. Florence Francesco, Paris, Switzerland, a wanderer. Citizen of the world. Many thanks to this organization, to Gabrielle. Thank you for giving us a chance to meet. Grazie. Thank you. I encourage you to stay with us. About 12:30 there will be an Italian aperitif offered by Renato Lombardo, who's going to who will be speaking this afternoon about the Off Fringe Festival.